In today's video, I'm going to be essentially talking about how do I personally like to use the knight. What are some of the things, tactics that I personally do in order to improve my dungeons per hour on the knight. I've been getting this question asked multiple times on people that are just switching into the knight, and I just wanted to say, hey, might as well just do a video just explaining what are some of the things that I personally like to do with the knight, and maybe with this it might help you out and might help you improve your dungeons per hour, or maybe you might enjoy the character a little bit more once you actually know of certain little things. So like always, make sure to drop a like since it does help out with the YouTube's algorithm. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Now I'm doing this on a live stream. Probably you can tell by the setup, I'm doing this on the weekly live stream that is going to probably be also on the channel. Now, what are some of the things that I personally like to do with the knight? Know that I obviously of course use the knight with the class gem ability. This is very important to talk about because not everyone ends up using the knight with the class gem ability. I'm one of those rare few exceptions that I've always been using this character with the class gem ability. Ever since the beginning of the game, I've been using this character with class gem. So I've learned over the years of using this character is when to use the class gem, when to use their basic attack, and now with the addition of the Volatile banner, when to actually use that to incorporate it in your dungeons per hour. So first things first, let's go over the class gem, because obviously this is the more important topic out of all of them. First and foremost, let's go over when do I personally like to use the class gem ability, the Spirit Squire. I made a video, by the way, a little while back just talking about which of the two is better, class gem and or no class gem, and essentially just explaining why class gem is better. Way that I personally like to use the class gem is to initiate combat. Spirit Squire is an ability that does 8.5 times damage multiplier. It doesn't lower your movement speed upon casting, as you can actually tell, you run 100%. It's instant cast, no cooldown, and it can also stun enemies. Those are pretty important little details to actually know about the knight, because knowing all of these, it means that you can just use this ability to increase your movement speed. So what I personally like to do with this class gem ability is I do that to initiate combat. So most of the time, whenever I see a boss, whenever I just use this towards momentum building, I always start with a Spirit Squire. The reason being is because I can just use a flash into a Spirit Squire, and if I'm going up against a boss, Spirit Squire stuns enemies. So a 1 second stun is going to give you more than enough time to actually just hit an enemy so many times before he can actually do damage to you. And if you do have enough damage, then you can just kill the enemy before he can do anything to you. Like for example, this world boss, I can just stun it and just kill it before he can do anything to me. So I always initiate combat with Spirit Squire because it's essentially a free instant cast ability that does high damage. And obviously, of course, you can end up using this for momentum building. I've always explained this in so many of my movement speed videos. This is important. Using a character for momentum building is very, very important. Because you can actually just use that towards your advantage in terms of just getting yourself as high movement speed as possible. I'm actually missing all of my Spirit Square, so ignore that. This is why I like this particular 5-star dungeon. It's actually good timing that it's actually here. This 5-star dungeon is actually the perfect indication of how good your character is in momentum building. So you can just end up doing this and just moving from point A to point B and just maintaining movement speed buff. Because you can actually just keep killing random enemies like this with using the stuff like the Spirit Squire, which it does enough damage that you can one-shot regular enemies. And yeah, I've mentioned this multiple times in the past. This has the tools to be among the best ability in the entirety of the game. Just because it has everything that you want for an ability. It's instant cast, it's no cooldown, there's no setup requirement, it can help you out in momentum building, so it can help you out in movement speed buff. And if you do have overcharge, it gives you a movement speed buff. And to top up all of it is also a pretty good utility based ability with the stun. And not to mention that it does have really good crocodile, so it makes it really easy to hit. So that's essentially when I use Spirit Squire. I use it to initiate combat and to get movement speed buff. I don't spam it on bosses because DPS on Spirit Squire is not good. It's actually really bad in terms of DPS, so just using it once on enemies like this is going to be very helpful and beneficial in order for you to actually just get as much movement speed as possible. Now, let's move on to the basic attack. So the basic attack is also very important towards the knight. The basic attack is the strongest thing that the knight can do. So always use the basic attack if you want to kill enemies as fast as possible. This basic attack is among the best in the entirety of the game, probably I would argue to be the most complete for dungeons. The reason being is not only does it have among the highest damage output in the entirety of the game of 4.55 at its base without counting passive ability, it's also statistically the third fastest potential attack speed in the entirety of the game. So combine really high damage with really fast speed and you have a really strong basic. Not to mention that the crowd control is insanely good. So what you end up doing is just holding down the basic attack after you do the Spirit Squire. Just keep holding down your basic attack for Cursed Skulls, for boss, and if you want the highest DPS. And yeah, that's essentially it when I end up using it. I never generally just use them to kill random enemies because the range is the shortest range in the game at 3 blocks. Using Spirit Squire, since the Spirit Squire does have better range than the basic attack, you generally don't use the basic attack for momentum building. You generally just end up only using Spirit Square because also basic attack lowers your movement speed by 30%, which is pretty bad. So yeah, just essentially just end up doing that. Just hold down basic attack. Basic attack is your main damaging ability. It's the same towards the beginning all the way to the end game. You essentially hold down a basic attack. That's why you should always go for attack speed with this character. Attack speed, movement speed is essentially the way to go with this character. So Spirit Squire for utility, for like momentum building and stunning bosses or initiating combat, and basic attack just to finish off bosses and kill as fast as possible. And obviously, of course, for Cursed Skull, it's excellent if you keep going back and forth like this because crowd control is really good. That's essentially going to be the basic attack and the Spirit Squire. You generally only use those 2 abilities. I don't use the Smash because Smash does the same damage as Spirit Squire but kills your movement speed. Can I go up? It's just generally a pretty bad ability all around. You know, it can do damage, but so does Spirit Squire, so there's no point in using Smash. And obviously, Iron Will is good if you want to just use it for panic buttons, heal yourself 100%. But considering the lifesteal is very easy, check out my last video that I made on the overpowered lifesteal node that is on the star chart. Yeah, survivability shouldn't be that big of an issue. But yeah, also you can end up using the ultimate ability every now and then, but for the most part, you generally just end up doing Spirit Squire and basic attack, and that's how you use this character for the most part. Now, Volatile Bounder. Also made a video about Volatile Bounder. There's so many links in the description. Yes, I'm a sellout. But Volatile Bounder is exceptional. It's the best mount in the entirety of the game, just because it grants something that none of the other mounts grant, and that is going to be incredibly fast vertical mobility. Gotta sneeze. Hold on. Yeah. Jesus, going to end up being cut. Vertical is something that is not easy to come by. None of the other characters generally have a really good vertical mobility. Knight is definitely one of them. So giving a really good speed in terms of verticality is really good for any type of character out there, because the only way that you actually get up is by jumping. And obviously Volatile Bounder not only is a free 20 block jump, it's also really good in terms of just moving really fast, because I do believe it's twice as fast as just jumping normally in terms of like speed. Obviously, as you probably could tell, I use Volatile Bounder on tall dungeon. Not necessarily like this one because the boss is downstairs, but dungeons like this, 2 dungeons in Geotopside right there, those are really good for Volatile Bounder, because you can essentially just go ahead, run around like this, do 1 Volatile Bounder and get yourself into the dungeon immediately. So you generally don't lose any speed whatsoever. Another little tip and trick that I can just talk about Volatile Bounder is the Volatile Bounder you can cancel off of most of the things in the game. I did talk about this on my Volatile Bounder video, but when you are in midair, instead of losing your movement speed immediately, like let's just go like this, if I have a lot of the movement speed buff, I'm running really fast, but I go into Volatile Bounder, you can actually see that my movement speed just gets killed off completely immediately. So what you end up doing is going to end up being, instead of using Volatile Bounder on the ground, you jump. And if you can actually tell, the movement speed, instead of being like an immediate decrease, is gradual, which you can end up using this towards your advantage, just going ahead and jumping Volatile Bounder into a jump so you don't lose any movement speed, and then considering the amount in this game, you can cancel literally everything off just by doing most of the action. Normally, like most of the amounts you can cancel off by doing an attack, but obviously Volatile Bander you cannot do that because it will do the bomb jump, but you can still cancel off doing a lot of animation. So stuff like dodge will cancel out, flash, bombs, and most importantly, abilities. So most of the things that you end up seeing me do with Volatile Bander is going to be in cancel out the Volatile Bander into a Spirit Squire, just because it gives me the overcharge. Spirit Squire doesn't lower your movement speed, and you get all of the benefits from going upwards and going forward. The Volatile Bander combination with Spirit Squire with overcharge. That's essentially all of the things that I normally like to do. So just to do a little bit of a quick recap, I use Spirit Squire to kill off random enemies and to initiate combat, just for the simple fact that Spirit Square has high damage and it doesn't lower your movement speed, and it's probably the best range that you can end up having with this character. I use basic attack for the majority of the combat once I'm inside the dungeon to kill enemies really quickly, because it's the fastest DPS that you can end up doing with the character. And I don't use any other ability like Smash or Iron Will, but hey, the Smash is pretty useless, but Iron Will can be served as a panic button. And lastly is going to be Volatile Bander is extremely important for vertical mobility, because it's the only thing that the Knight generally doesn't have going for, which is just essentially just horizontal mobility, and just giving them a vertical mobility is actually very nice. But yeah, that's essentially going to be everything for today. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for sticking around as always. This was again recorded on the live stream, so if you're actually watching the VOD, you might be very confused on why the hell am I posting this, but hey, I wanted to do this recording for well over a month now, so I'm just going to essentially just wanted to do the recording here on live stream. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe for more content like this. Let me know if this helped you out on your night, if you are switching off of this character, and yeah, I hope to see you guys next time. Take care and keep on hunting. See ya.